And today is Friday, the 26th of December, 2025. So we are literally in the last week of the year. I'm coming to you live from northern Israel, as I do so often, to speak with you about what is happening with wow, what an amazing dog. To speak with you about what's going on right here in the Muddled East. And yes, I call it the Muddled East. Currently, obviously, we are in a kind of a ceasefire phase in the war between Israel and the Hamas in Gaza. But that's not to say that the war is over, because it's not. And if you've watched any of my videos in recent months, you know exactly that I think that this war is unfortunately likely to continue, and that by delaying the disarmament of the Hamas, it is becoming increasingly inevitable that we're going to see more explosive action, so to speak, which is very unfortunate. But that's how it goes. And I blame that partly, as much as I'm a supporter of Israel, I think that Israel is making a mistake in its tactics, in this capacity, in this respect. Because at the moment, the government of Israel is demanding that the Hamas and its ilk return the last body of the last known dead Israeli hostage being held by the terrorists in Gaza. We should get his body back ASAP. We should have received it already months ago. But unfortunately, the terrorists know that that is their last point of leverage, and that's really the key to their survival. Meanwhile, Israel thinks it's a good idea to keep letting the Hamas stay in power as long as they haven't returned the last body, because somehow that will allow Israel to apply more pressure to them and eliminate more of them. But of course, that's foolish, because it's basically being hoisted by your own petard, right? Yes, Israel can continue to eliminate Hamas terrorists in Gaza who violate the ceasefire or who generally pose a threat to the security of Israel or participated in the actions of October 7th. But by letting them stay, hello there in the chat, by letting them stay, we are literally rewarding them by letting them rearm, retrain, resupply, regroup, take more control over the people in Gaza, reassert their control, if you will, because they're still the government in Gaza officially. Whereas if we force them to disarm, like they're supposed to do, and leave power, well, then that's an entirely different paradigm that we would be facing at that point, right? Unfortunately, the government of Israel, for whatever reason, has determined that the thing to do is to just simply keep up the pressure against the Hamas and keep eliminating their top guys instead of actually getting them out of power. So it is absolutely counterproductive in my perspective, or from my point of view, because we should be focusing on getting the bad guys out of power, de-armed ASAP. That is the top priority, in my opinion. And then, of course, once we do that, getting the last body back home is a top priority. But we should not be letting Hamas basically reassert itself throughout Gaza, which it is doing literally since the day the ceasefire was signed. And, troops began moving, Israeli troops began moving back to what's called the yellow line, or the 50% line of control of Gaza. Literally since that day, Hamas has been not only attacking Israel in violation of the ceasefire, but they've also been reasserting extremely violent control over the people living in Gaza. to reassert their dominance and to show them that they're still in control and they're still in charge and they're not going anywhere, despite the fact that they literally signed the plan that says that they're going to willfully disarm themselves and withdraw from political power. And that those that don't agree with giving up the armed struggle, also known as the mukawama, also known as terrorism, those that don't agree to give it up would exfiltrate or be shown the door out of Gaza to go to Egypt or where else they want to go, not in Gaza and not in Judea and Samaria. And those that do agree to give up the terroristic ways of the Hamas would be allowed to stay in Gaza. Now, of course, they can say they give up their terroristic ways and, of course, continue to be terrorists. And, well, then in that case, they would continue to be targets once we have evidence that they are, in fact, doing that. But this at least gives an opportunity to those who want to give up the armed struggle, not that many would, or even any. And it also gives an opportunity for those who wish to remain alive, even if they think that their armed struggle is justified, to get out of the way. And so that they would be basically departing the field and, not a direct threat in the immediate future to Israel and Israelis and people living in Israel. So, from the point of view of military strategic maneuvers and tactics, I think Israel, as I said, is making a significant error here in allowing Hamas and the other terrorist groups to basically reassert control of Gaza in the cruelest of ways. What does it say? Pray for Israel. Well, thank you very much. Yes, pray for Israel. It is very sad to me that the Israeli government is making this decision, has continued to make this decision, and is therefore also making it worse for itself in terms of the supposed international force that is going to come and somehow disarm Hamas, as if that would ever work. Of course it won't. There's only one group that's going to actually successfully disarm the Hamas, if it's not the Hamas giving up the guns themselves. And that one group is known as the IDF. Because, let's face it, no armed force made up of mostly Arab countries and Muslim countries is going to disarm a group like Hamas. First of all, they don't have the desire to do so. Second of all, they simply don't have the capability. And third of all, they're not going to invest the resources necessary to get it done. Fourth of all, it's not in their interests to get the Hamas to actually be out of power as long as they continue using it as a stick against Israel to continually pressure Israel to cave to Palestine, if you will, or the Palestinian cause, and this ridiculous notion of a two-state solution. And that's the crux of my discussion today, or what am I talking about today? Because the so-called two-state solution, just in case you're wondering, is an arcane concept that assumes that Israel is dealing with a partner that wants peace, when in fact, we're not. Israel is dealing with an enemy that simply wants to destroy us. That's all they want. They don't actually want peace, and they don't even really care about having a state called Palestine. As much as they'll pretend and they'll scream and shout, free Palestine and all this nonsense, if they actually wanted a state of Palestine, they would have made one long ago. In fact, in 1948, they would have accepted the peace between Israel and the Arabs, and they would have declared their land is Palestine, the land that they were given under the partition plan, which was voted on at the UN in 1947, and which was approved by the UN General Assembly. Maybe the last good thing they ever did, at least in terms of regarding Israel. Since then, the Arabs have simply rejected every single attempt by the Israelis to make peace. Not because they wanted a Palestine. Remember, in 1947, when it was the British mandate for Palestine, a British colony, not a country called Palestine, but a British colony, under rule of the British king and the queen, the British Empire was mandated by the Balfour Declaration in 1917 to create a homeland for the Jews on the land that is today Jordan and all of what is today Israel, including Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. Again, for those of you not familiar, Judea and Samaria are what people in the West who have been brainwashed by the Arabs call the West Bank, which simply means the West Bank of the Jordan River. Right? It's just Judea and Samaria are the ancient names that we Jews have continually called it because that's what they are called in the Bible. And that's what friends of Israel and Christians and even Muslims have called it for thousands of years. But in the last century, it became en vogue, fashionable and trendy to call it the West Bank as basically part of the Palestinian plot, right? The Arab plot to declare that land the West Bank in order to supposedly delegitimize the connection between the Jews and their homeland. Jews are from Judea, right? We don't call it the West Bank. We're not West Bankists. We are Jews from Judea. And the Palestinians who live in Judea, right? The Arabs who live in Judea, because there is no Palestine citizenship, but they call themselves Palestinians. They simply want to erase our connection to our own homeland. They want to pretend as if it never existed because, well, they're crazy, but they know that the more you tell a lie, the more people will believe it, which is the old Nazi trick of Goebbels, right? The propaganda Nazi master, or the Nazi propaganda master who worked for Hitler during World War II and the Holocaust, who just kept repeating lie after lie after lie, calling Jews rats and vermin, and, poisoning the blood of the Aryan race and all this garbage. And the more you repeat the lie, the more people will believe it because most people are, frankly, below average intelligence. If you look at the normal distribution of anything, right, including the normal distribution of intelligence, well, half the people are below the mean or the average. And some other small percentage are literally at the mean, which means that most people are at or below the average, which is not very fantastic when you consider that means that most people are basically not above average intelligence, right? They're at or below average at best, right? And this is how it goes. So the more you tell a lie, the more it becomes true in the minds of the smooth-brained idiots who don't have a clue. That's just sadly a fact of reality, mathematically and statistically. So that is why you get that lie about the Palestinians supposedly having a connection to the West Bank and the Jews not having any connection to Judea and Samaria, literally our homeland. So it means that this two-state solution is a joke, right? It is not going to work because, for one very simple reason, and what that reason is right, despite people wanting to deny it all day long till the cows come home, is the fact that we are involved and engaged in a religious war, right? Yes, land has to do with it on the political and PR level, but it's not about the land, okay? The land is really there as a leverage point, and also it's a point, and that leverage point works both ways, and it's a point which the Arabs, who call themselves Palestinians especially, have a hard time admitting. For example, when they lose a battle, they can never admit they lose a battle when they get crushed. God will help Israel. Thank you, brother. Thank you. So the make-believe argument Palestinians swear that they live and die by is that the land is what they want. If only got the land back, then there would be no war. Well, that's clearly provably false. However, we know that Hamas, thinks of themselves as the group that will save the Palestinian cause by killing all the Jews and everybody in Israel, et cetera, et cetera. So for them to lose a square inch, and they've lost many square inches, is a massive defeat and humiliation, which they deserve because of what the nonsense is that they've been doing. But it's really a religious war. And until people internalize that and realize that the problem is Islam and Islamism, right? Until you realize it's not just, some individuals are doing bad things. No. The problem at the core is that the religion of Islam is fundamentally flawed and leads people to do evil things. This battle will not end because Islam believes that it is in a holy war against the Jews. And until that is settled, until that is a thing of the past, there will never be peace between Muslims and Jews writ large. And therefore this war will continue. And also there will never be peace between Muslims and Christians writ large. So all in all, it's a terrible situation for people who actually want peace. Anyway, that's going to do it for now. I'll catch you guys later. Have a good one. Peace and shalom.